Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode with Montana Outdoor Science School. We have another live stream today. It is also Earth Day, everybody, so happy Earth Day. Alongside with Earth Day, it's a good time to start thinking about ways in which you can keep the Earth basically as natural as possible, ways to recycle, ways to sort of help nature, conserve nature in any way that you can. It's also a day to think about where your water comes from and the watersheds that are involved in what that water, where it flows, essentially. Like always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask that in the comment section. We will try to get that answered as quickly as possible. If I don't see the question personally, someone is on hand to answer those for you guys. I'm not sure if I introduced myself. My name's Melanie. I'm one of the instructors with Moss, and I also have a couple questions for you guys as well. So one of my questions is, where does your water come from? And that's your personal water. If you live in the Bozeman area, we have 3 distinct places that our water reserves come from. If you live elsewhere, you may have a reservoir, you may have a river, there may be all kinds of spots that your water is available at. The other question I have for y'all, and this is more of a general question, is where does all water eventually flow to? What I mean by this is essentially, what's the last destination that water is going to get to? What is the ultimate place that water will accumulate or kind of flow together at? So I want to know what y'all's answer is to that. Feel free to answer these questions here. And again, if you have any questions yourself, please feel free to ask them at any time. The first thing I want to start off with is, what is a watershed? We're going to talk about what that is. I'm going to show you guys a little activity to kind of help you better understand it. This is an activity that you can do in your own home or you can take outdoors with you. And then we're going to kind of talk about real life scenarios with watersheds. But the first thing let's get started with is the definition of a watershed. A watershed is an area of land that divides where water flows. So if you live in the Bozeman area, we have a watershed called the East Gallatin watershed. That means that all the rivers, all the streams around here eventually flow to the East Gallatin River. I actually have a really cool thing I want to show you guys that is a really good show of how watersheds work, and also it shows our personal area here in the Gallatin Valley and the surrounding areas where watersheds are. Let me get my camera squared away, turned around for you, and I'll show you guys what I've got going. So I have what is called a topography map, but this one is a really cool type of topography map. This one is a 3D topography map. Topography maps are maps that show elevation, and in this one, the elevation is shown with these reliefs across the board. You can see that mountains are obviously going to be higher. If you look at it from a side angle, you can see, sorry everyone, you can see all these ridges here kind of come upward. There's also depressions, and the depressions are what eventually are going to gather water. So in this area here is our town, Bozeman. And you can see it is in a flatter area. That's why they call it the Gallatin Valley, of course. Our river, let's see if I can find it on here. East Gallatin River. Aha, here we go. East Gallatin River. Everything around us eventually flows towards that. The East Gallatin, of course, eventually meets up with the Gallatin, which flows past Big Sky. It actually flows in this direction. And eventually all these things meet up with both the Madison River, the Jefferson River in the Three Forks area to make the Missouri River. What's fun about watersheds is you can have lots of little watersheds within a bigger watershed. So for example, around us here, everything that is snowpack, anything that falls as rain or any kind of precipitation, if it falls on these sides of these mountains here, it's essentially going to be a part of the East Gallatin watershed. But if we were to zoom out, if I could show you guys an even bigger map of the United States, you would see that we might have a bigger watershed for the Missouri River, which would include all of this area here within the side of Montana. On the other side of the Continental Divide, at Butte, that water flows in a different direction. It does not join the Missouri River, but we in our valley here in the surrounding areas, eventually everything joins the Missouri. Let me show you guys my activity that sort of relates to topography maps like this 3D sample I have. Essentially, we're going to create our own watershed by crumpling paper and then demonstrating how water will flow off of that paper with a little spritzer. So let me get my camera squared away here so I can show you guys once again how this activity goes. For this activity, you will need 2 pieces of paper, or you could do it with 1. I prefer to do it with 2 so that I have a nice base for my crumpled paper. You'll also need some markers. These should be markers that are water soluble, meaning if you spritz them with water, it's going to flow. It's going to, what's a better word? It's going to, the dye of the markers is going to come off on the paper a little bit. And then I have a little bit of tape to tape down my paper, and also my water bottle spritzer, like so. So the first step is the most fun. It's kind of a little bit of destructive construction, and that's crumpling your paper. So much fun. I love doing that part. Make sure you don't crumple it too much. You don't want to be unfolding it and refolding it. You just want to do one solid crumple like I did here, and then you can unfold it very gently. The goal is to get a section that has more of a relief to it. So you want some sections that are kind of tall, just like mountains are. I'm going to continue to unfold this, but I'm going to get some tape to kind of make this a little easier to stick in place. I've got this nice section at the center. I think I'm going to keep that. I've also got some other ridges that I would like to keep as well. So don't flatten your paper as you do this. You want to make sure it stays relatively pointed in spots. It's okay if when you do this, not all of your sides touch the ground. I've got one section for sure on this side that's not down. Over here, most everything is down, but on this side, I'm just gonna let that hang in the air like so, and that's okay. And then from here, you're gonna take various colored markers, and this is what I want y'all to think about as you're doing this. Ask yourself and hypothesize where water would flow to, where it's going to gather as you're doing this activity. So if I was looking at this from the top, I can see that there's clearly one great big ridge line right here, and I feel that as I spray water on this layer, there's going to be a definite watershed on this side of this mountain and another one on this side of this mountain. So with that hypothesis, I'm now going to take markers to visualize this, to show what's actually happening. Let me pull out my marker bag here. The beauty of this project is you can use colors of any kind. I'm going to be using purple to start with. There's a few ways you can do this activity. When I teach it to my students, I have them start at the top of ridges and then draw lines down to where they think water would flow. You could pretend that where you start is like a drop of rain or a snowflake, and ask yourself, where is it going to roll eventually once it's melted? Where is it going to flow to? So I'm going to start on this section, and I'm going to say it all flows down here. And I'm just going to keep on doing that across the whole way. Let me put my camera down so that y'all can watch me as I do this. And I'm going to use this one color for what I think is this watershed here. And I think if I change watersheds, I'm going to then add a different color. You can also ask yourself when you do this project, how many watersheds are going to be on your map? Is it 2? Is it 10? Are there little watersheds within bigger watersheds? Are there going to be any lakes that form maybe that will flow to other places? All right. So I've got what I think looks like one good watershed. I think looks like one good watershed right in this section. I didn't notice this at first, but I think there's going to be another watershed in this area. So I'm going to grab a different color now for it. I think I'll do orange. Orange is always a nice color. What'll be fun is when we start spritzing water, these colors may end up kind of bleeding together. And if two colors end up coming together, two watersheds end up coming together, that's okay, because that's what real life is like. There are often watersheds that join together that will become one great big watershed, much how our river here in Bozeman eventually becomes a part of the Gallatin watershed with the Gallatin River. I like that. Neat. It's also okay if you have spots where you aren't sure, but try to fill in as much on your paper as you can. So I might go back to my purple. I think I've got some purple that's going to flow this way. I think I've got some watershed over here. Oops. I'm going to use this color. So as water does flow down mountains, across landscapes, even flat regions, it does take with it sediment. Sediment is small particles of material. It could be pebbles, could be rocks, could be organic matter. Sediment eventually makes its way down to those lower regions, which is how we have boulders and rocks from mountains eventually moving down to lower areas. I'm going to do another watershed across this whole region here. I may even have two watersheds on this side too. If you have been thinking about these questions here, feel free to pop an answer into the comments section. I'm curious to know what places your water comes from. I'm also curious if y'all have an idea as to where all water eventually flows to. And again, if you have any personal questions too about this activity, feel free to type that in and I will try to answer them as fast and as quickly as I can. I think I'll use brown for this side. So I'm looking at where all this water flows, and if I imagined a snow cloud or a rain cloud coming over this mountainscape, water is going to go in a multitude of different directions. It's going to go one way with the purple, maybe another way with the orange, and maybe the orange and purple eventually meet up together, and then it's going to go another way with this darker brown over here and this pink. And I've got this one last section. I might do that one as green. Actually, I'm going to do that one as blue, and then I'm going to save the green. And again, this is all hypothesis. I'm not entirely certain where all this will flow exactly, so I'm just making as best a guess as I can, an educated guess. So fun. Like I said earlier, sediment is something that may start to flow, so I'm going to dot my landscape with sediment with black so that we can really see where the black ends up flowing, and that's just going to go across the whole board. I'm just going to leave little dots. We'll pretend they're boulders or pebbles or rocks. We'll pretend that they have a spot that they're going to go to. Oops, some of my dots came out more like lines. That's okay. The flow of sediment doesn't just happen in a mountainous landscape like this either. It can happen in the lowlands as well, which is how you get rivers that meander. You get sections on those meandering rivers that have developed like almost an island, or maybe they've developed like a side that's growing over time. All right, now that I've decorated this thing, I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to spray it with some water. This is going to be the fun part. This is my favorite part of this activity. All right, get ready to watch the magic happen, folks. I'm going to do some very small sprays at first. I'm not going to give it too much water. Oh, nice. Look at that. And I'm going to try to get it from all angles. I'm not going to do it too fast or in one spot only. I'm going to try to get the whole thing at once. Wow, the brown's a really good example. You can see where the brown's all flowing to. Oh, and especially like here, this was one of my dots I put for sediment. You can see that's starting to flow too as rocks and pebbles and other such things begin to break down. Ooh, nice. We got some river action going on with the purple. It's accumulating down here in this basin. We got the oranges starting to bleed as well. Oh, and now the brown is starting to go too. Look at that. Neat stuff. Nice. So again, if you do this activity, it's okay if your colors end up bleeding together. It's always more fun to add more color on here. And then try to guess too how many watersheds you may have. Try to count them up. I'm going to confidently say right now that I have... ooh, my blue and my brown are coming together. Do y'all see that? So these are two watersheds that clearly became one. So I'm going to say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 watersheds. And then, of course, if you break it down into smaller regions, such as this blue one here, you could say that there's even more potentially. Excellent. So that's that idea for you guys. Now it's starting to kind of lose some of its color. If you really darken up this project, it can really become really colorful and really fun. It's also a really easy one to just let dry, and it can kind of be a piece of artwork as well. I'm going to show y'all a real example of a watershed out here. I'm going to go take a little walk around my neighborhood and show you guys some of the examples of water flowing. Bringing this all back to an Earth Day perspective. Earth Day is all about thinking about how we can treat the earth better, how we can recycle, how we can keep our environment as natural as possible. And one of those ways is keeping our garbage, our trash, our plastic especially, out of the watersheds. As you saw, water flows downward. If you have answered that one question yet, eventually all water flows to the ocean. In the oceans, they're finding that plastics have started to accumulate in spots. And they're finding that not only that, but the plastic isn't breaking down. Ooh, I have a good example of plastic right over here under this bush. Can you all see that shiny thing right there? That's a bit of plastic that blew in. We had a very windy winter in my neighborhood, and trash cans got knocked over and a lot of bits of plastic blew around here. But going back to the plastics idea, plastic, it's not like organic material. It doesn't break down like like leaves, like branches. It doesn't break down like dead or dying materials. It takes a super long time for it to break down. What ends up happening is it breaks down more like rocks. Rocks eventually turn into pebbles. Pebbles eventually turns into sand. And that's the same thing going on with plastic. It turns into very small pieces of plastic, and it turns into what is known as microplastic. Microplastic is a phenomenon that is fairly recent, and it's not well studied. There's a bit of plastic right here. I'll come back for these later. Plastics end up becoming so small that they get consumed unknowingly by small creatures. They also end up in food ecosystems and food chains, and unknowingly it started to appear in larger animals of food chains. And what ends up happening is you have microplastics that may be affecting the health of creatures. It's uncertain to what degree it's affecting ecosystems though. Just because, like I said, it's a new phenomenon. It's not something that has been studied for a long time. We need more time to sort of see what'll happen. But it brings around that idea of you can help prevent microplastics from developing by trying to take care of your environment. There's another little bit of plastic down in there. Take care of your environment. Be sure to recycle if you can. Bozeman takes number 1s and number 2 plastics, which is really nice. And then you can also just make sure that plastic isn't going to be getting anywhere if you can prevent it. Like I said, this winter we had a really windy winter, so making sure your lids are tight on your trashes, or that the lid is closed on dumpsters is really important too. And just trying to keep the places around you as clean as possible. But I think I'm going to end here for everybody. I just want to say thanks for joining us today. Earth Day is a great day to get outdoors and take care of your environment around you. And with that, I think I will end the discussion. So thanks everybody. Hope to see you next time on Friday for our next live stream.